Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Monday, January 1st, 2024. First, I just have to wish everybody a happy new year. If you're watching this on YouTube, I post the show at midnight if you're on the East Coast in the United States. So happy new year if you're watching. And I know people listening over in Europe, it's already the new year for you. So I wish I had some good news for you to start off the new year, but unfortunately, I have some very bad news like usual. But I just want to thank everybody for all the support this year. I got a lot of new readers at antiwar.com and a lot of new listeners and viewers of this show. And again, our fundraiser went really well, which was pretty heartening because other recent ones did not go as well. And, I've been doing so much more work these past few years that it's just good to know that people are appreciating it. All right, so to get into the news, the first news stories of 2024 for this show, the top story at antiwar.com. The Israeli military says the Gaza slaughter will continue for all of 2024. So the Israeli Defense Forces said Sunday that it will withdraw some troops from Gaza, but that it expects the brutal assault on the enclave to continue through the entire year of 2024. So this is IDF spokesman Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari. He said the military was adjusting its, quote, fighting methods to each area in Gaza, end quote. And he said that they're doing this to prepare for a long conflict. He went on, quote, tonight, 2024 will begin. The goals of the war require lengthy fighting, and we are prepared accordingly, end quote. So he said that the IDF was taking these measures out of the understanding that they will need additional missions and continued fighting during the entire coming year. He said that some of the reservists who are in Gaza are going to be returning home to their families. So later in the day, the Times of Israel reported that the IDF said they were pulling a total of 5 brigades out of Gaza, which that's a lot of troops. There's usually a few thousand in each brigade. So 5 total brigades, that's a lot. Now, it's not clear if they're sending in an equivalent number or if they're just pulling them out for now or what the story is. But Hagari, the spokesman here, is making it sound like they're just making adjustments to, again, prepare for a very long war. And Netanyahu and other top Israeli officials have made clear that they plan to continue the Gaza slaughter for the long term, despite international calls for a ceasefire and now accusations of genocide. I linked to a story from there. South Africa filed a case at the International Court of Justice accusing Israel of genocide. So the international criticism and pressure is ramping up. Despite that, Netanyahu said on Sunday that his campaign will continue for many more months. And the U.S. continues to provide unconditional and full-throated support for the massacre as the Biden administration bypassed Congress for the second time to get more weapons to Israel. I'll have more details on that in another story. So just an update on the numbers. In less than 3 months of relentless airstrikes and a ground campaign in Gaza, Israel has killed over 21,000 Palestinians, including over 8,000 children, and wounding over 50,000 Palestinians, over 50,000 wounded. And these numbers are considered a low estimate. Over 7,000 Palestinians are missing in Gaza, presumed to be dead or dying under the rubble, and that includes 4,900 women and children. About 85% of Gaza's population has been displaced, and about 1/4 are facing famine-like conditions. So as the Israeli operations continue through into 2024, many more Palestinians are expected to die from starvation and disease caused by the siege. Public health experts are warning and estimating that if things don't change, nearly 500,000 Palestinians will die within a year, and that's mostly, again, from starvation and disease. And once people start dying of that, it's going to happen very quickly. So the destruction in Gaza is also unprecedented compared to any other modern conflict. There was an analysis from the Wall Street Journal that found nearly 70% of all homes in Gaza and about 50% of all buildings have been damaged or destroyed. So that's just gives you an idea of the scale, just the sheer scale of destruction that's happening. All right, so the next one here. Once again, Biden bypasses Congress to approve arms sale to Israel. So this article is from Brett Wilkins. So citing the urgency of Israel's defensive needs, the Biden administration on Friday said it would bypass Congress for the second time this month to approve an immediate arms sale to the key Middle East ally as it continues to wage a genocidal war against Gaza. The Associated Press reported that U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken notified lawmakers of the new emergency determination involving the sale of $147.5 million in equipment, and this includes fuses, charges, and primers for 155mm artillery shells that Israel has already purchased from the United States. The unguided explosive rounds, which Israel is using in heavy populated urban areas, have a kill radius of about 50 meters, with shrapnel able to inflict lethal wounds on people hundreds of meters away. The State Department said, quote, "The United States is committed to the security of Israel, and it is vital to the U.S. national interest to ensure Israel is able to defend itself against the threats it faces." So somehow they're justifying that supporting this mass slaughter is in the U.S. national security interest. I mean, it's just complete nonsense, but this goes to show all that rhetoric about, concern about civilian casualties and everything. It's all meaningless when they're Biden, Blinken, Sullivan, all of them are fully in support of what Israel's doing. All right, the next one here. Over 1,000 children in Gaza have had one or both legs amputated. This article is from Kyle Anzalone. International aid workers visiting the Gaza Strip are relaying the horrific situation Israel is inflicting on the Palestinians. So this is according to UNICEF, and they're saying that over 1,000 children have lost legs, either one or both. And I mean, you guys keep hearing me say the death toll. Sometimes death tolls, you just get kind of numb to hearing them. You don't really think about it, but just think about around 1,000 children have lost one or both of their legs. I mean, that's just horrific. And most of these surgeries are being done without any sort of anesthesia, no painkillers or anything like that. Just getting their legs cut off, fully awake. I mean, it's just, imagine going through that as a child. It's unimaginable. So the next one here, this is an article from the Times of London, and it's titled "Children Eat Rotten Food, Adults Hunt Cats. Famine is Coming for Gaza." And this is just a really horrific story about the situation. And if you see this picture here of these children just crowded up, bunched up together with dishes and trays out, lining up for food. So I'll read from some of this article. In the wasteland of Al-Mawasi encampment in Gaza, hunger is everywhere. It is in the handfuls of dirty flour that mothers try to knead to make bread for their children. It is in the fires stoked with plastic bottles which produce nothing but choking black smoke. It is in the children who no longer play but lie around exhausted. It is in food that is rotten and makes you sick but is eaten just the same. It is in Camilla Sube's breast, which no longer produces milk for her baby son. So this is this woman who is a mother of 5. Basically, her sons keep telling her that they're dizzy and they have a headache, and that's due to dehydration. And she's sitting outside a shelter when she spoke with the Times that she built on the mud from scraps of plastic and wood. Sube and her children left their homes in northern Gaza weeks ago on the instructions of the Israeli Defense Forces, which dropped leaflets telling people in their area to come here to 3 square miles of rubbish-strewn dunes and pockmarked fields with no tents, food, water supply, or any infrastructure to support the displaced. The IDF says this is a safe area. Perhaps it is safe from the bombs that have destroyed Gaza cities and towns, but not from hunger, diseases, or thirst that will kill just the same as a bullet will. She says it's just like a desert. And then this gets more into just the death toll and the risk of famine, and just the fact that it seems to be coming. Again, if nothing changes, that's what's going to happen. All right, so the next one here, Israeli minister says expel Palestinians from Gaza. So this is Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich. He has once again called for the expulsion of Palestinians from the Gaza Strip and for the return of Israeli settlements to the enclave. So Smotrich, who's the leader of the extremist religious Zionism party, he told Israel's Army Radio, quote, "What needs to be done in the Gaza Strip is to encourage emigration. If there are 100 or 200,000 Arabs in Gaza and not 2 million Arabs, the entire discussion on the day after will be totally different. They want to leave. They have been living in a ghetto for 75 years and are in need," end quote. So it's an interesting thing he's saying there, is that, if there was just 100,000, 200,000 Arabs in Gaza, we could deal with them. 2 million is too much. So he's basically calling to reduce significantly by about 90% the population of Gaza. Smotrich previously expressed support for the idea of voluntary resettlement. That's what they call it, but they're going to they're making Gaza uninhabitable, so Palestinians will have no choice but to flee. Other Israeli officials have made it no secret that they hope to ethnically cleanse Gaza, including Netanyahu, who said last week that he was looking for other countries to absorb Palestinians. Smotrich also holds a minister position in the defense ministry that gives him the power to expand settlements in the West Bank. And Smotrich is a settler himself, so it's no wonder that he wants to bring back settlements to Gaza. He told Army Radio that he does not think there's anyone in Israel who doesn't want to see Jewish settlements everywhere. In an interview with Israel's Channel 12, Smotrich spoke more explicitly about his desire to see Israeli settlements in Gaza and envisioned an Israeli military occupation. He said, quote, "We will be in security control and we will need there to be civil control. I'm for completely changing the reality in Gaza, having a conversation about settlements in the Gaza Strip. We'll need to rule there for a long time. If we want to build there militarily, we need to be there in a civilian fashion," end quote. So Smotrich is considered, an extremist in Israeli politics, but the fact is he's a member of the government, of the coalition. And again, he was given very broad powers in the West Bank overseeing settlement construction, and that includes, demolitions of Palestinian homes and businesses and stuff. So these are the types of people who were in this Netanyahu government that came into power at the end of 2022. All right, so the next one here, Netanyahu says Israel will control Gaza Egypt border. This article is from Kyle Anzalone at the Libertarian Institute. And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declared that his forces will conquer the territory along the Egyptian border with Gaza. The Israeli Defense Forces started operations in northern Gaza, driving millions of Palestinians toward the border with Egypt. Netanyahu said this on Saturday, quote, "The Philadelphia corridor, or to put it more correctly, the southern stoppage point of Gaza must be in our hands. It must be shut. It is clear that any other arrangement would not ensure the demilitarization that we seek," end quote. So this is just another sign that, again, when we were talking earlier about the civilian casualties, the U.S. still sending all the weapons and expediting them and bypassing Congress. You also hear Biden, Blinken say, after the war, we need a two-state solution. We need to revitalize Palestinian Authority to govern Gaza. But you just have Israeli officials like Smotrich and the prime minister basically saying, no, we're going to conquer it. We're going to take it over. Doesn't matter what you say. And it's clear that it doesn't matter. It might as well just be completely irrelevant what Biden and Blinken are saying about the future for Gaza, when it seems like the Israeli government has its mind made up already. All right, so the next one here, UNICEF says that it was the deadliest year for Palestinian children in the West Bank. So this is not Gaza that they're talking about. This is in the West Bank. And this is an article by Connor Freeman. And the United Nations Children's Fund, that's UNICEF, they issued a statement on Thursday describing 2023 as the deadliest year on record for children in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem. The UNICEF Regional Director for the Middle East and North Africa says violence resulting from the Israeli occupation is reaching unprecedented levels. Adel Koder, that's the UNICEF official here said, quote, children living in the occupied territories have been experiencing grinding violence for many years, yet the intensity of the violence has dramatically increased, end quote. For Palestinians prior to this month, this year was already one of the deadliest on record prior to the October 7th attack. Before the end of September, more than 220 Palestinians had been killed by Israeli forces, including over 36 children. That figure included 187 people who were killed in the occupied territories and another 37, mostly amid a smaller bombing campaign in the Gaza Strip. I believe that was over the summer. It was like a 3-day Israeli bombing campaign in Gaza. Violence in the West Bank has killed 124 Palestinian children and 6 Israeli children since the start of 2023. So again, that might not sound like much compared to what's happening in Gaza, but for the West Bank, this has been one of the most violent years since since really the second Intifada. All right, so the next one here, ruined landscape of Gaza after nearly 3 months of bombing. So I mentioned this. This is the Wall Street Journal analysis basically about the destruction of Gaza. And it says by mid-December, Israel has dropped 29,000 bombs, munitions, and shells. So almost 30,000 bombs have been dropped on Gaza. And this gets into the statistics that I mentioned. Nearly 70% of all the homes in Gaza. And it just mentions some of the things that have been targeted. Byzantine churches, ancient mosques, factories, apartment buildings, shopping malls, luxury hotels, theaters, and schools. Much of the water, electrical, communications, and healthcare infrastructure that made Gaza function is beyond repair. So they're trying to make it uninhabitable. So if you want to go check out the details of that, you could go read this story from the Wall Street Journal. And, I kind of like running these articles, like the one from the Times of London and the Wall Street Journal here, from these mainstream sources that we normally wouldn't just run their articles as is, but they're just describing, it's just the facts are in front of everybody. And you could just see how horrific it is just by just taking a look at just the bomb, the number of bombs dropped and the destruction and the starvation. There's not really a good way to spin that to make Israel look good, even in Western media. All right, so this next one here, the U.S. sinks 3 Houthi boats in the Red Sea, killing 10. So this article was the top story all day on Sunday. This is a big story. The U.S. military sank 3 vessels belonging to Yemen's Houthis during a confrontation in the Red Sea on Sunday, killing 10 as tensions continue to rise in the region due to the U.S.-backed Israeli slaughter in Gaza. So according to U.S. Central Command, 4 Houthi boats were attacking and attempting to seize the container ship Maersk Hangzhou, which was struck by a missile a day earlier. CENTCOM said helicopters from the aircraft carrier USS Dwight D. Eisenhower responded to the ship's distress call and then engaged with the Houthi boats. So this is the U.S. military side of the story. CENTCOM said in a statement, quote, in the process of issuing verbal calls to the small boats fired upon the U.S. helicopters with crew-served weapons and small arms. The U.S. Navy helicopters returned fire in self-defense, sinking 3 of the 4 small boats and killing the crews, end quote. So they're claiming self-defense. And the Houthis have confirmed the incident and said at least 10 of their Navy personnel were killed. The Houthis have been launching attacks on Israel-linked shipping in protest of the assault on Gaza and have vowed that they won't back down in the face of the U.S. Navy. The Houthis said that the boats the U.S. attacked were, quote, performing their humanitarian and moral duty to prevent Israeli ships or those heading to the ports of occupied Palestine from passing through the Red Sea, end quote. Houthi military spokesman Yahya Sari said the U.S., quote, bears the consequences and repercussions of this crime, end quote. And he also affirmed that the U.S. military maneuvers in the Red Sea are not going to stop Yemen, not going to stop the Houthis from what they're doing. And the Times of London reported on Sunday that the U.S. and the U.K. were preparing direct strikes on the Houthis, which would involve bombing Yemen. So according to this report, the U.S. and Britain are planning to bomb Yemen. And, this really could explode this whole situation. I mean, the killing of the 10 Houthis is a major escalation. Who knows how they're going to respond. And if the U.S. starts bombing Yemen directly. That could break the truce between the Saudis and, who knows what this thing could turn into. This Times report said that the US and the UK were expected to release some sort of joint statement on Sunday, basically warning the Houthis that if they don't stop, they're going to bomb them. But I didn't see anything like that. So, maybe the report isn't right. Hopefully it's not right. Hopefully they're not planning to bomb Yemen. But I don't see things de-escalating here. I mean, we're just in this escalation spiral. So definitely an area to keep an eye on. And I mean, anytime I think the U.S. could end up bombing Yemen, or the UK. And the report also said a third country that was the unnamed European country will probably be involved. I would guess that would be France. Okay, so the next one here. Suspected Israeli airstrikes kill at least 6 in eastern Syria. So 3 suspected Israeli airstrikes hit eastern Syria near the Iraqi border on Saturday, killing at least 6 militants. The strikes hit targets near the city of Al-Bukamal in the Deir ez-Zor province. Both the U.S. and Israel have launched airstrikes in the area before, but a U.S. official told the Associated Press that the U.S. was not responsible for this round of airstrikes. So typically, recently, when the U.S. has been launching these airstrikes in Syria and Iraq, they usually take credit for them. Israel, on the other hand, they don't usually maintain a policy of ambiguity when it comes to their bombings of Syria. Israeli officials do discuss their bombing campaign in Syria from time to time, but they never really acknowledge individual airstrikes. So that's kind of Israel style when it comes to bombing Syria. So I think it's safe to say that this was Israeli airstrikes. And the Israeli media outlet Ynet said that the attacks were attributed to the IDF. So that's Israeli media saying so. Syria's defense ministry also reported Israeli airstrikes on the city of Aleppo on the same day, with only material damage reported. So when it comes to these airstrikes in eastern Syria, Iraqi militia sources told AP that 2 members of Hezbollah, of Lebanon's Hezbollah, were killed in the strike, as well as 2 Syrian militants. Sorry, actually, there's a typo there. I have to fix that. 4 members of Hezbollah, they said, were killed. And then you have the UK-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. They put the death toll much higher, saying that 25 were killed, including 5 Syrian nationals and 20 non-Syrians, but that number is not confirmed. Israel has bombed Syria with impunity for years and has ramped up airstrikes on the country since October 7th. And the U.S. has also launched several rounds of airstrikes against Shia militias in eastern Syria and in Iraq in response to attacks on U.S. bases that started over Biden's support for Israel, what they're doing in Gaza. So the last known U.S. airstrikes in Iraq were on December 25th, which I covered last week. Biden said, this is what the U.S. says. They bomb these militias and they say, we're doing this because we don't want escalation, because we want to deter them. But it doesn't deter anything. There's been basically nonstop attacks still on U.S. bases, and they continued through the weekend. They were reported on Saturday and Sunday. So there's so many areas where things can really just explode. If they get one big direct hit on U.S. troops in one of these bases and they kill a few of them, who knows what would happen then. There would be there's already a lot of pressure on Biden to bomb the Houthis, to launch more airstrikes against these Shia militias in Iraq. So if a few Americans die, then things are really the calls for war with Iran and stuff, it's really just going to ramp up. All right, so the next one here, former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett pushes for the U.S. to lead an Iran regime change effort. So this article is from Jason Ditz. And the Wall Street Journal ran an op-ed from Naftali Bennett, the former Israeli Prime Minister. He was Prime Minister from 2020 to 2022. And he is saying that the U.S. should be leading a global effort to impose regime change on Iran. So this is a former Israeli prime minister. He's still involved in politics, saying the U.S. should basically attack Iran for Israel. And the argument for regime change is nothing new for the Israeli hawks. And the U.S. is backing Israel. Jason just gets into some of the details about the U.S. backing Israel in Gaza. So Bennett argued against Israel focusing on attacking Hamas and Hezbollah, calling Iran their primary enemy and saying that Iran must always be the focus, with the U.S. expected to do the focusing. Attacking Hamas, even with huge civilian casualties, is politically very popular within Israel, so the Gaza war is unlikely to be slowed down. Bennett made another piece of international news in this opinion piece. He revealed that Israel was behind a February 2022 attack on an Iranian drone base. So that was one of, there's all these covert, there's been over the past few years, and going back a long time, Israel launches covert attacks inside Iran. Sometimes they blow up things, and they plant explosives in nuclear facilities, or sometimes there's these small drones hit Iranian military facilities, or they assassinate nuclear scientists. So he basically strongly hinted that Israel was responsible for this one attack. So this is just typical of an Israeli official to say, hey, the U.S. should go take out Iran for us. All right, so the next one here, Ukrainian attack on Russia kills at least 21. So this article is from Kyle Anzalone. So on Friday, Russia launched a major missile and drone attack across Ukraine, and they're saying it's the biggest of the war since February 2022. They launched over 150 missiles and drones, killed about 31 people, according to Ukrainian authorities. So then the next day, on Saturday, Ukraine launched a missile attack into Russian territory, into Belgorod, a region that borders Ukraine, and killed. Now the death toll has risen to 21 and 111 injured. They say 3 children were killed. And this is the biggest Ukrainian attack, single attack on Russian territory. So this is, the risk of escalation when it comes to provoking Russia to attack NATO or something is still very real, even though I think it's clear Putin and Russia do not want to fight NATO. But, this makes me think, as we have this Zelensky government that's increasingly desperate, not getting the aid that they need, they're going to start doing more things like this, I think. And according to Russian officials, they used a Czech-made multiple launch rocket system to fire these missiles into Belgrade. And they said that they fired cluster bombs into Belgrade, which are, they scatter small submunitions over a large area. They're notoriously harmful to civilians. So that's what Russia is saying Ukraine used, the NATO weapon and cluster bombs nonetheless. So the next one here, Biden again warns that the U.S. could fight Russia directly. So President Biden on Friday called again for Congress to approve more spending on the war in Ukraine, claiming that if Russian President Vladimir Putin is successful in his war, it could risk pulling the U.S. into a direct confrontation with Russia. Biden made the comments in a statement on the Russian attack on Ukraine that was said to be the largest of the war. So this was after that. Biden released this statement. He basically used that attack to make a fresh pitch for Congress to approve this military aid. Biden said that Ukraine was able to intercept some missiles with U.S.-provided air defenses and added that, quote, unless Congress takes urgent action in the new year, we will not be able to continue sending the weapons and vital air defense systems Ukraine needs to protect its people, end quote. The president claimed that the stakes of the war extend beyond Ukraine to the U.S.'s European allies. He said, quote, when dictators and autocrats are allowed to run roughshod in Europe, the risk rises that the United States gets pulled in directly, end quote. So Biden and other officials in his administration have been using this argument in their pitch to approve the over $60 billion that they're seeking to fund the proxy war in Ukraine for another year. So the central claim is that if Putin wins in Ukraine, he's going to roll into Eastern Europe, roll into Poland, and then that's it. World War III, that means direct war with Russia. But there's no indication Russia wants to do that. It's a completely nonsensical talking point. Putin has called the claim nonsense and said he has no interest in war with NATO. And I think that's clear. So this is just, again, this makes for a scary headline because it says, Biden warns of direct war with Russia, but it's part of his pitch. And even though, he says that if they stop funding Ukraine, it means war with Russia. But then here you see Ukraine using NATO missiles to fire into Russian territory, with that risks a direct war with Russia, much more so than, you know, the U.S. backing out and Ukraine and Russia making a peace deal. All right, so the last one here, Venezuela sends 6,000 troops to Guyana border. So this is another one from Jason Ditz. Tensions over the fate of Guyana's Essequibo region continue to rise, with reports of Venezuela deploying some 6,000 troops into the border region to conduct exercises. And this deployment is in response to the British deploying a warship off of the coast of Guyana. So Maduro says that the British arrival violates an extent deal between Guyana and Venezuela and constitutes a threat to both Venezuela and a violation of Latin American sovereignty. And it's certainly a sensitive thing to have the British show up when, you know, the whole dispute is kind of a remnant of the British Empire in Latin America. So it is a small ship. It's a river-class patrol vessel that the British have sent over there with an estimated crew of between 34 and 45. So it's not like big firepower or anything. But tensions are still rising over here. Maduro recently met with Guyana's president, and they agreed to settle their issue through non-military means. So hopefully, you know, they stick to that and the tensions ease. Of course, when things, because recently in December, Venezuela held a referendum to incorporate Essequibo into Venezuela as a new state, basically annex the territory. So tensions have been pretty high. And after that, the U.S. did some joint military exercises with Guyana. You know, of course, the U.S. will be involved if this does turn into something. And the U.S. has failed in its regime change effort against Venezuela. So, you know, they still have all the sanctions on Venezuela. They ease some, but still have a lot. And then ExxonMobil is drilling a ton of oil off the coast of Guyana, and it's an area that Venezuela claims. So those are interests that the U.S. Likely wants to protect. But that's it for the news for today. Please go check out our viewpoints. We have one from Doug Bandow, Another Mideast War Beckons America. One from Lenny Breutman over at his Substack, What America's Veterans Want You to Know. One from John and Nisha Whitehead, White House Goes Rogue, Secret Surveillance Program Breaks All the Laws. And one from Thomas Knapp, War and Democracy, An Appeal to Self-Interest. And our spotlight is from Ben Arbister, Mainstream Media Was Not Good for U.S. Foreign Policy in 2023. So that is everything. I know I said the other day that it might be this might be a short episode, but, you know, so much stuff is going on. There's just a lot of news over the weekend. And, you know, it's scary. There's so many areas here where it seems like we could really get sucked into a major war in the Middle East. We're already backing one in Gaza, but I mean, things could really explode. So definitely a lot of areas to keep an eye on. But again, Happy New Year to everyone. You know, again, thanks for all the support and the help. I will be back tomorrow with some more news for you. Another day in 2024. But I'll talk to you then. Thanks for listening.